Hello, welcome to our show. We are Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. Here we focus on what it takes to make your ideas happen and the steps you can follow to make it just a little bit easier. Subscribe to our podcast to join the ongoing conversation about all things startup business related. Find even more content on our YouTube channel, Ryan's Business Class. See the link in our description of this episode. So glad to have you here. Maybe we can learn something together. Enjoy. Hey, and welcome to Business Love with Ryan podcast. I am Ryan, coming at you on April 5th, 2020 from Kyiv, Ukraine. I am so happy to be with you today. We have a lot to discuss today. We are going to talk about something of a snapshot of the business environment of the last 10 years, what we've accomplished, and then we want to talk about what we see as being the trends moving forward. It's very difficult to say what trends that were perceived in January even are still relevant today, but some of them are more likely than others to play an impact in the near future based on the circumstances of quarantine and the coronavirus epidemic that we're going through. Just a few news stories before we get started with our main sections. Last week Congress passed a $2 trillion stimulus bill for the United States. It implies that every worker is going to get something like $1,200, and there's going to be a lot of forgivable loans that are going to be handed out to various businesses. But I'm telling you right now, this is a corruption free-for-all. Banks are going to be making upfront fees on the loans that are handed out using government money, which is fine because, processing transactions is expensive. It requires multiple people to sign off on it and take time to examine it, and bankers are traditionally paid more than most people just because it's a high responsibility industry. But the government is borrowing $2 trillion because they need to protect the public, supposedly, from the decisions that the government has made about what the public can do. Businesses are being forced to shut their doors, oftentimes against their will, and then the government decides what they're going to do is borrow a lot of money from the future, more money than has ever been borrowed at one time before. 10% of our total national debt is being borrowed at one time. And cash is just being put into the hands of a small few people. And it's already documented that, for instance, Nancy Pelosi of the Democrats came right in after they had already made an agreement and made a bunch of extra demands, like money for the Kennedy Center, which she's intimately tied to, which is obviously a financial kickback to her. If you think she's so with the Kennedy Center in the forefront of her agenda all the time, and then they're not giving her all sorts of perks and benefits, then you don't understand how politics works. And I think a lot of people are getting a taste of this. It was absolutely bipartisan in the Senate. Every senator on both sides of the aisle voted yes on this stimulus package. Well, part of it is because who wants to be seen as voting no on a stimulus package that the public is expecting to get? Not to ask yourself, is it a good idea to create stimulus packages in the first place? Do they actually work? I'm not sure it's actually proven that they do. But we do know that the public gets a taste for it. Somebody all of a sudden says, hey, how about we hand out $1 billion to the public? And the public goes, oh, some of that's for me. I vote yes. This is the problem with voting. This is why we have a republic instead of a pure democracy, because people in certain places might get a mind culturally, collectively, socially in their community that they want to vote for more money. Well, the rest of the country is going to have to participate in providing that money. And, do we want social programs left, right, and center? Because I think a lot of these programs we're creating in response to this coronavirus crisis we're never going to be able to get rid of. We're going to take actions now that are going to cost us as a society, as a generation. The truth I feel about the world that's been handed to me by the specifically baby boomers is that it's already been mortgaged. My future has already been mortgaged by the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s. Generation Xers, who was the generation right before me, seem to have sort of become detached. They had sort of the same opinion, which is the previous generations have mortgaged their future. But in my lifetime, last Since 2008, let's say in the beginning of the financial crisis with George W. Bush, the United States was something like $8 to $10 trillion in debt. And then George W. Bush came in, and we had the war in Iraq. We had $700 billion stimulus package to help us out of the economic crisis back then, which could be argued that it didn't really do that much. It could be argued that what the government should have done is actually backed up Lehman Brothers a little bit better, propped them up, even though, because they eventually did it with AIG when they realized that they had made this mistake weeks earlier with Lehman Brothers, how devastating it was for the entire market. Instead of propping up some of the most vulnerable institutions, they let it crash and then tried to address it with a massive payout. And this is what they're doing here too. And why do they do that? It's because there's a lot of little fingers to take little pieces out of it. You create a slush fund like this that the terms are not clear. People don't know who's entitled to get loans and who isn't. What I actually see happening is bankers around the world rejoice. Now they have hundreds of millions each to give out as loans to their friends. If I'm a banker, I'm calling every friend I got who owns a business and saying, hey, you want to get a free loan? You're going to get, the money's going to be forgiven later. I'll put you at the front of the line. Just remember me. It's happening all over the country as we speak. Local bankers are negotiating with their clients to do all sorts of benefits. All sorts of secret handshakes are taking place right now. Kickbacks galore. Percentages add up here and there. When the bank gives a $10 million loan to a local business owner, the bank is allowed to charge a fee of 1%. Well, 1% doesn't seem like a lot when you're dealing with PayPal and they take 2.9% plus 30 cents. That seems like a small amount because you're spending a couple $100 and that is maybe $6 or $7 in fees. No problem. $2 trillion on the other hand, we're looking at, 10, 20, 30, $40 billion in fees that banks are going to pull out of this. Not to mention the secret kickbacks between executives and clients. Not to mention all the favoring that's going to take place. Who's first in line? Who gets the loan first? Who gets the biggest loan? Maybe this business is only entitled to get a $2 million loan, but the guy knows the bank president, so suddenly he's getting a $10 million loan that we all understand is going to be forgiven. So why not take as much as you can? Everyone's going to be taking as much as they can. It's an absolute pillaging of the promises made to future generations. I don't see a future for the generation following me. I see the United States hurtling headfirst into socialism, and it seems to me some people in the government really would love to bankrupt the government. They can't spend enough. Nancy Pelosi is already coming out talking about how, we need more packages. We need more packages, more money packages for the public. This is just a down payment on what the public needs. By the time this is over, you watch. The United States is going to be $30 trillion in debt. It's going to be 150% of our GDP, and those interest payments are really going to start to hurt. We already spend hundreds of billions of dollars on interest every year. It takes a sizable chunk out of the actual money that we get from taxes every year on money that we've already spent. Mostly on, I don't want to degrade the quality of life, how much one life is worth. But I do know that one life is not worth the entire economy because we all depend on the economy. It's just as important to our life as the blood flowing inside of us, is the economy flowing around us. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. The economy is what brings you the food that you eat. It goes on one truck, then it goes on another truck, then it goes in a warehouse, then it's processed, then it goes on another truck, it goes to the grocery store, then it's taken off the truck, it's distributed through the grocery store. All of those are economic transactions that are at risk right now. We're going to see the infrastructure really start to deteriorate. We've already seen 10 million people in the United States lose their job. And for what? A mysterious illness that only kills the very old and maybe the weak. Well, maybe you should have taken care of your life. Maybe being obese wasn't such a smart idea after all.
maybe the beauty of some self-worth is not so beautiful after all when you're struggling for life in the hospital, because if you were a healthy person, maybe you wouldn't be having such adverse reactions to a sickness that has come. But I think most people recognize that the danger really isn't to them. It's to their parents, and I'm worried about my parents too. And I would like for this all to go. But I do know that I'm going to need something to eat in the summer, and I do know that everyone watching this is going to need food in the summer. And I don't know how much money you have saved up, but I know some people who are already out of money. There's some people who are already going around asking their friends and neighbors for what money they can get. It's already happening. I'm sure there's people who are watching this right now who are really wondering where that next paycheck is going to come and when. And some people in the government are talking about, 3 months? Oh, 3 months to save some lives. Well, what happens when I can't eat for 5 days straight? Or what happens when they turn off the electricity? Or what happens when my kid has a sickness that I can't afford to pay for now because I haven't had a paycheck in 12 weeks? And usually when the husband can't work, maybe the wife goes and waits tables, but there's no restaurants open. This is worse than a depression because everything is closed. It's not a depression, it's like a coma. And I can't help but think that there are people who are really taking advantage of this. And so for our Tech Tuesday, I want to talk about some of the advantages that have come to technology in the last 10 years. And I think you're going to see specifically by how I group them together and what I have to say, of course. But I think there is tremendous potential for a better life coming. But I think at the same time there's a lot of risk, because when you see the way that the United States government, for instance, is treating this situation where they just can't wait to just cash in some more debt. They can't wait to just get their hands on some more money. And I think it's just naive and beyond reason to think that all kinds of these people who are claiming to help you are actually trying to reach into your pocket, reach into your children's pockets. So let's pause here and let's go into our Tech Tuesday, and we'll be right back. Well, for Tech Tuesday, what we're talking about is the biggest leaps that we've made in the last 10 years, and we're talking about things that are obvious, like artificial intelligence, blockchain, cryptocurrency, augmented reality, virtual reality, but there's some that you might not have thought about as much. For instance, in neuroscience, the most fascinating thing I can think of is that they've made extreme advances in neuromodulation. Neuromodulation is fascinating because, your muscles put out electrical signals, through your nervous system. And we're getting much better at picking up on those signals and understanding what they mean. And so we've gotten to a place where they can implant a node into your muscles or into your brain, and it can pick up your energy signals, and you are able to control devices by thinking about controlling the devices. Your mind sends a signal that would have normally gone from your brain to your arm, for instance, and that signal is picked up by a neuromodulator, and it is interpreted in the, I suppose, limited number of ways that it could be interpreted. The signal has a certain frequency, it comes in a certain location, it comes in a certain interval, and so they understand that when this signal comes, it's meant for this purpose. But the real reason I wanted to talk about this subject, of course, knowing what's been happening in the last 10 years is a great way to understand where to go to make money. If somebody had said to you in 2010, social media is going to be the thing over the next 10 years that is going to grow like crazy. Well, we knew at the point in 2010 that social media was one of the great advances from the last 10 years. And then it turned into an industry over the next 10 years. So I imagine that's what's going to happen with any one of these industries that I'm mentioning now or about to mention. But I want to start off talking about a real risk that is associated with the industries that we're mentioning. The idea is that there's global grand challenges. And some people will say that there's overpopulation. Some people will say that it would be better if we had more government control to tackle things like climate issues, if that is such a thing, or to tackle such things as global poverty or global pandemics like we're experiencing right now. And the tech industry has become increasingly socially conscious, to the point that I would say that they're almost socially controlling. But we went from an internet that really didn't care about anybody but itself. I mean, we had Napster, we had all of these, just homemade applications that would allow us to trade information in all kinds of ways. And it was fascinating, but there was a real kind of wild, wild west feel to it. If you remember going back on the internet in 2002, 2005, this was before social media. We still had Google, but it wasn't as good as it is now. And we had some applications that we could use for very specific purposes. And for instance, Sean Parker didn't care if he was disrupting something or if he was just making something cool that was useful. And it immediately changed everything because of the implications of just what the internet is. But over time, the tech community has become very political. They've become very politically correct. What you can and cannot say. Try to say the word retarded in the comment section of Yahoo, it will get bleeped out or put into hieroglyphics or whatever you call them in order to indicate that there was a profanity there. Well, that's because Yahoo has decided that this is a bad word. And it comes down to the fact that, these companies are in California. And it comes down to the fact that, there's a certain culture in California that, is very pervasive and has these sort of soft values of understanding and compassion and, giving everyone equal treatment, which is nice. I kind of like to have a world that was a little bit rough around the edges. This smooth, soft, suburban veneer is not terribly attractive. It's definitely not sexy, that's for sure. But there's a real risk with this, too. Once, your global providers start to have political opinions about the way you should live or the way your government should run or the way your government should treat you, especially because they have so much power, they have so much insight into who you are. This is something that has exploded, this issue, this goodness of social consciousness mixed with the, I suppose you could say, badness of a controlling mentality, a megalomania that can emerge from such power. And we've made another industry that we've made tremendous progress is data science. With artificial intelligence, we can categorize, we can draw connections between data that we never would be able to as just normal people. We are able to use cameras and sensors and all sorts in ways that were never possible before. And now 5G is about to come on the scene as well. So these sensors will be able to work on overload. We'll be able to put sensors on things for the smallest reasons. A sensor cost a penny to make. And now we have the 5G and artificial intelligence to process the information. It's a whole new world, but it's a dangerous world because suddenly we have all the tools necessary for global surveillance state. The same control that Stalin had over USSR or that Mao had over China or that this Xi Jinping has over China right now is it's a contagious economic reality. It's a contagious social reality. And China is definitely interested in surveilling the whole world if they can. They would definitely love to have control of everybody. That's why United States has banned Huawei from using any sort of United States networks. And Britain has made an agreement to do business with Huawei because of the advantages of it, but there's also terrible risks. And it's already beginning to undermine the global intelligence community that United States, Britain, and several other important countries all participate in. It could be, the idea is that there's 5 countries that all share their intelligence freely, as though it's just, we're all brothers here. And that is England and China, and I think, not China, England and United States and Australia, and I believe a few others. And now England has perhaps compromised their networks, their basic networks of communication, so that China can look in on anything at any time. This is the fear. And China wants to do it, so it's not a unrealistic expectation that they would do it, that they would do anything they can. And there's been other news articles that Saudi Arabia has been doing the same thing. They've put spy equipment into not equipment, but features into applications, and Saudi Arabia has relaxed protocols to participate in the American infrastructure, just because we have such a close relationship. But they've already started to demonstrate that they're not necessarily trustworthy actors in such an open connection between United States, for instance, and them. But it's more than that. You go to England and there's a video camera on every corner. You walk down the street, even in here, like in Ukraine, where people are very much more private, and they're not so nosy, and they're not so bending over backwards to get into your business. There's just more of a sense that the government just doesn't care about you here. It's just not that they're, overly controlling. They're just, doing their own thing. But if you are in the center of Kiev, if you're in the center and you're walking down the street, if somebody walks up to you and punches you in the face, I think it would take you about 15 minutes to find a camera that caught that, because there's cameras on every building. Schools all have cameras on them for children. If you're smart, you have one of these camera ringers on the front of your house. You can catch who's stealing your packages. You can catch crimes that are taking place. The other day I heard a man was standing in the entryway of a house talking with another young man, and he confessed to a murder. The homeowner heard the confession, called the police, and he actually ended up getting arrested for this. So there's surveillance taking place all around you. Now, the newer, younger generation is much less likely to have read books like 1984. They don't remember Soviet Union. And what's happening in China, it's difficult to condemn China just because of the stance the media takes on China and the benefits we've received from them economically over the last, 20 years has been extremely significant. I mean, the entire world is experiencing abundance because of, you could say, the sacrifices that China has made, sacrificing their citizens and their environmental quality and their reputation around the world. I mean, I think 10 years ago, when I was in university, China was generally respected by most business students. It was like, wow, China, they're really doing it over there. They're coming around. They're growing towards the West, and look at how much money we're making, and look how much money they're making. They have this many billionaires now. Wow, a success story. It'll be one of the great stories of human existence. It was the rise of China out of poverty as a result of interacting with other economies. But Xi Jinping, as much as he pulled it all together in the beginning, or did a lot to enhance the productivity of his society that he's managing, in the beginning, it's almost like obviously he's much more thin-skinned than you would hope any leader of any country would be. Them trying to hide this coronavirus is just ridiculous. You spill milk on the table, instead of trying to call mom in the room to help you clean it up. You do everything you can to help her clean it, to keep her out of the room, while the milk spills on the carpet, creating irreparable damage. Now it's going to smell like spoiled milk in here forever. And that's sort of what it's like around the world, in a way. China, I think, probably this virus got out of the Wuhan facility. They were working on it. Yes, it came from bats, like they said, but that doesn't imply that it didn't come from the facility. Probably they were embarrassed about it. All of a sudden, one of their doctors didn't follow protocols, and he got infected and walked outside and infected a bunch of other people. And, it takes a couple weeks to find out what's happening, and before you know it, you've poisoned yourself. What kind of story is that for the world stage? China's already in the middle of a trade war. They're already in the middle of a conflict with Hong Kong, and now they have this to worry about. That's one way to look at the story. Another way to look at the story is that they poisoned themselves, knowing it would spread around the world to cripple world economies who are actually ready to hold them accountable for some of their behavior. Each one of these stories is equally likely for different reasons. But the result is unacceptable either way. China hid tremendous danger from the rest of the world. China has the blood of the international community on its hands due to negligence. Someday when China rules the world, I'm going to regret having said this in this podcast. No, stand up for truth. Let's do it. One final thing on this point is that, we've made major advances in the last 10 years in this CRISPR, genetic selection, genetic engineering. The field is, digital biology. But we've made tremendous advances in the last 10 years, so tremendous that the idea of selecting your sperm and egg to put together based on the potential to get the best possible result is actually almost here, if not here in some places already. If you're, for instance, a billionaire and you have, your wife and you want to have a child, but you want to make sure it's the best possible child that you could get. I mean, what is the smartest you can make us? What is the most talent you can get out of us? What is the best physical features? Maybe this man is not particularly good looking and his wife hopefully is better looking than he is. But, maybe they're both fantastic looking and they just want to make sure that those good qualities are passed on properly. It's not just about appearance. Like I said, it's intelligence. Intelligence would probably be the first one, or avoiding disease. Like maybe there's a history of some, multiple sclerosis in the family, and you'd like to make sure you don't pass on those specific chromosomes that are likely to cause that. It's wonderful. So that it really is a situation of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, because there are still going to be young people accidentally getting pregnant all over the place, and those children are going to have to compete with genetically selected. We're all going to have to compete with genetically selected human beings. Luckily, I'm already the age that I am when you think about that. I got 10, 20 years more of runway before the superhumans take over the earth. And that's fine with me. Maybe my children can be stronger too as a result of this. Maybe we as a human race will get further because we'll have more geniuses, perhaps. We'll have better piano music because there'll be better pianists or more of them. Just could be so many good things coming from our population. But the reason I mention it in conjunction with this surveillance state of the last, developing before our eyes, the reason I mention it is because the ultimate discrimination that a government who controls its population can do is look at you genetically and decide if you deserve to live, decide if you deserve to have children at all. They could decide what happens to your children, of course, once they're born, but that's a different discussion. But you don't want to be prevented from life-saving medicine, or from eating, or from living in certain places, or receiving the best possible of anything just because you're not genetically superior in terms, that's a terrible thing to say. But let's say genetically, you have some genetic vulnerabilities, and you don't want that to exclude you from having your best life. From, in some cases, having a life at all. Imagine if we were in Nazi Germany and they had taken over the world. And now all of these technologies are coming out. And what do you think would happen? How do you think they would treat people? They'd go through and DNA test everybody and decide that 10% of the tests are just completely unacceptable. And let's escort them out of the city. They disappeared. And a few other industries we should mention for Tech Tuesday is cryptocurrency. That is new. Business strategy, the lean startup concept has really, really materialized and come into its own in the last 10 years. And so is business software. There's business software now that can apply intuitive workflows to your business that you might not have even thought about. And it's based on, concepts of lean startup. It's based on really advanced business models that are available in the management academic community, for instance. Those have come a long way, and they really can help you. They're very intuitive. Some of the most basic would be, for instance, tax software or planning software. Intuit has great software that would fall into this category. Energy, clean energy, we talked about it last week. It was never about the clean energy not providing energy. It was about how do we hold it. And now we've gotten to there with, Gigafactory and battery packs. And if you want my advice about a business to buy into as soon as possible, it's that Tesla. I don't care if they're going up and down. I don't care if their stock price is $500. Get one share if you can, because that is the stock to hold on to. They have 6 gigafactories now, and world maturity is something like 100 gigafactories. So what we're looking at is a company that wants to grow 20 times, has already plans to grow 2,000%. Something to think about. But the problem is you never know when to buy, because it goes up $50, it goes down $50, Just pick a time when it goes down and get in, and be glad you got in. Digital manufacturing and 3D printing. Imagine, diversified manufacturing. That is the name of the game in light of the way this whole China episode is taking place. Why are we having all of our manufacturing in one place? And I'm telling you, 3D printers have really come into their own since like 2015. High-speed carbon printing. That means you can print components for anything. And they're harder. Once that carbon solidifies, it's much harder, carbon fiber. So we're really to a place where we really can create components, especially for prototyping. If you have a machine you want to create, you can 3D print all of the components in probably 1 or 2 days, and you're back to your prototype. Food technology, we've gone from eating real meat to plant-based meats, where they've learned how to alter the cells of plants to be more like meat, the proteins. AR and VR. And the real challenge of this section is to identify what has taken place in the last 10 years. What are the biggest breakthroughs in the different industries in the last 10 years? Industries such as digital biology, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, energy. What are the innovations that have taken place in the last 10 years? And, how can you participate in that industry? And it's just like anything else. You start off educating yourself about that industry, and then you establish your identity. So you need your social media and your website. How much you're going to use them will be ultimately determined by the type of business that it is, but it doesn't hurt to get it started in the beginning. And then you're going to want to develop your product or your service. So are you creating original content? Are you just want to deal in the idea, and the implication of the idea is way over your head? Well, writing out the business plan will at least provide you with a flag that you can wave to the community that says, I have an idea, I have a project, I have a thing I'd like to work on, and you're committed to it at all costs. And that's what writing a business plan indicates. It gives you something to believe in. Just like religious groups have their religious texts. Well, your business plan is something you can hold on to fervently and passionately. And that fervor and that passion will wear off on the people you share it with if you're active, if you're not scared. But the challenge of our Tech Tuesday, and let's just wrap it up here, is that we want to pick the best business models to pursue. We want to frame our passions in a way that is relevant now. So you need to know where we're at. And so I highly advise you to look into industries that I have mentioned, maybe find something for yourself. These industries are the ones that are going to make billionaires in the next 10 years. So good luck. Our Strategy Now section this week, I did get an article from Singularity Hub about 20 technology megatrends that will define the next decade. I feel like for Tech Tuesday we talked about the last 10 years and the industries that are growing out of profound breakthroughs over the last 10 years. However, now let's talk about what we see in the future. Up until this coronavirus pandemic began, the number one chief consensus about what is going to happen in the next 10 years is that we were going to have increased global abundance. That means things become cheaper. That means food becomes more available. That means products become more available, less scarce. Production, manufacturing improves. We're already at a very good place where most people in the world have food to eat and clothes to wear. But, some of our technologies, like we've said, over and over again, AI and 5G and, some of these others, perhaps augmented reality in some way, have really put the rocket boosters on the progress we're making. And then now we have energy prices just plummeting. I used to love to play this game called Halo on Xbox. It was about a space crew who are in space and they're battling aliens who, are just, insane. And in the game, there's these massive structures, giant space stations, and you go on planets and there's these massive buildings, and you think to yourself, wow, what would it, if they could actually exist in real life? But the real question was, how much energy would it take to create such a structure? We have our skyscrapers now, we have our massive buildings that we've been able to build, we've made achievements in building, especially we've made achievements in transportation. But now, with energy prices potentially bottoming out, and let's say that we cut out oil altogether and we start going to nuclear and we're able to store the power we get from nuclear energies to save for a rainy day in the form of batteries, and we don't need oil anymore for any reason. Suddenly, sky is the limit about what we can achieve as a culture, as a society. We can, build the biggest possible things. We can make cars that go faster, trucks that are stronger. We can be gratuitous in the capabilities that we give to our vehicles and the projects we choose to take on. The sky is the limit. It's an exponential potential for growth. The problem is now we have this pandemic coincidentally occurring at a nexus point, at a breakout point, at the point of the catalyst. All of a sudden, we're dealing with this ridiculous health scare. It's for that reason alone, and I just can't not say it. It's an amazing coincidence. And then it's a sickness that develops in Wuhan, a few kilometers away from one of only a few dozen such facilities that test bad viruses in the world. The odds of that actually being true are ridiculous, are just beyond. So, what do I actually think is going to happen? Everything will be fine. We'll get this solved. Our economy will really suffer, but everything's already in place. The buildings are built, the machines are assembled, the supply chains have been agreed upon. It just, you stop the engine and people aren't going to get paychecks, and this is going to be devastating on a personal level. But as far as us as a society, or, the future of mankind and, managing the technology, or, bestowing technology on future generations, that is all going to continue. So if we can get our fingers around this situation, we will be able to march forward into the future on a cloud, so to speak. Our technology is making that possible. A global gigabit connectivity will connect everyone and everything. That's a trend. I just said that it's going to happen. Capital abundance. You'll be able to get loans for projects. There'll be more opportunities than anyone has the motivation to pursue. Augmented reality is coming. They seem to think that AI is going to become human-level intelligence, and I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it will ever happen. I think they are grossly underestimating the nature of human consciousness. I don't believe it's a closed system, but that's not really what this show is about. Globally abundant, cheap, renewable energy. That is the ticket. That is the big one. And I think there's a war going on right before our eyes. It just doesn't look like a war because we can't fight anymore because of nuclear weapons. So now we use cheap shots. We use economic manipulation. We use quote-unquote mistakes or, accidents to push forward our agenda. And there's a lot of people whose agendas are being pushed forward by this corona panic. There's a lot of people who are being served perfectly by what's happening. And you got to ask yourself, how close are they to the cause? And in the next 10 years, they think by the end of 2030, you'll be able to go into a clinic and select the son and daughter that you want from your sperm, from the egg. You can select which egg you'll use, which sperm you'll use. So I encourage everyone to build their strategies based on such conjectures. This list was compiled in January. So some of it is not seem so accurate right now, but we are still in a world of abundance. Pretty soon, we're going to abundantly see the solution to this. You just got to give private industry the ability to step forward. So I want to just talk about some business ideas that we can do from home based on some of these meta trends that we are seeing. Let's assume that everything is smart, embedded with intelligence. Well, you would want to participate in that revolution if you can. There's almost no way, no business that you can create that couldn't benefit from sensors, your entire body, your entire health. So you realize that our entire bodies within 10 years are going to be censored up. We're going to be able to know so many things about the way our body works. We're going to discover new ways that our body works. Maybe we'll be able to measure electric current in our body, or the electricity that our heart is putting out, the blood flow, our body heat, how much water we have in our system, how hungry we are. The list goes on. Anything that you can measure, you'll be able to measure. So the question you have to ask yourself is, how would I like to be measured? Well, I would like to know exactly how much nutrition is in my body. Maybe we can develop a sensor for that. I would like to know how much protein I need or, how much protein I don't. If I have too much protein, I would like to know that as well. Let's say that, we'll be able to sense abnormalities in our blood. Maybe in 10 years, the sensor that we injected into our skin will be able to tell us immediately if we have coronavirus or not. They'll be able to monitor your blood on such a level that that chip in your skin will send a reading to maybe a localized device that you have in your home, and then that reading can be processed against, that device can be online so that you can get processed in with a larger index if you wish to. The question is, though, will it always be voluntary? Somebody, especially if we start having government medicine, will it be voluntary to submit such information, or will they just be hacking into your devices all the time? The more you use these sensors, the more you use these embedded devices, the more you have to assume that other people are looking at that information as well. But for the business founders in my audience, I just want to say, imagine how sensors can work for you. Maybe you have a niche way of using it. When you come in the house, you want to take readings on different vitals of your body. You want to take readings about the vitals in your home. What are the temperatures in every room? You want to take readings about the food in your refrigerator. Every single piece of food that you buy could have a sensor in under the label that monitors the freshness of the food that you're eating. You can know when things are about to expire. You can know... I'm just trying to go through the house and think about everything that you use and how a sensor can be used on it. But these are all business ideas, and it wouldn't actually be that expensive to get off the ground. You just have to identify what the purpose is and maybe do some wrangling to get it manufactured within the United States or to get a sensor that's programmed properly. That might cost a little bit of money. So you might want to look for funding, but this is the sort of industry you can find funding for. So the idea is use your creativity. apply the metatrends that are coming into the future. Let's just pick one at random that I haven't even read yet. The insurance industry transforms from recovery after risk to prevention of risk. I'm going to have to read more about that one, but what I think it means is the insurance industry would like to get fees without spending as much money as possible. So maybe they switch to providing supplements or encouraging fitness, or maybe if you buy insurance, you also get a membership to a gym. They've made an agreement together. And but be careful with that, because maybe they start to monitor how much you're actually going to the gym. Maybe you have a bracelet around your wrist that monitors every exercise you do while you're in the gym. And maybe you haven't worked out hard enough, or you didn't maintain a heart rate for 20 minutes, so now your insurance agent is calling you up and saying, hey, do you want us to continue to cover you? Get in the gym. We want to prevent heart problems. So this is a risk. But for our young business founders in the audience, let's assume that the insurance industry would like to use sensors to monitor some of their more at-risk patients or their more at-risk clients. So what would a sensor like that look like? What would the interface be? The sensor would feed back to a localized device that can read the sensor and then put data into your computer. So what would that interface look like? Somebody's going to need to program that. What's it going to look like physically? Is it going to be purple? Is it going to be blue and white? Is it going to be yellow and orange? I don't know. That's for you to decide. But there is such a need for it over the next 10 years. I mean, we're talking thousands of different types of devices, millions of units sold, billions of units sold. So if you want to make $1 billion, look at these metatrends and pull a business model out of it. Let's read one more. One that I haven't read yet. High bandwidth brain-computer interface will come online for public use. So I'm guessing that they're going to incorporate augmented reality to allow you to, and they're going to have the device also connecting to your brainwaves somehow. So what they want to, it's sort of like using nanomodulation, neuromodulation. It's sort of like perhaps they're going to implant a chip on the back of your head or on your upper neck back here, and it can map your brain waves, and it can make sense of what those brain waves mean, and it can, at least to a certain extent, identify your intentionality, and that can interact with the chip in the back of your head, can interact with the augmented reality contact lenses that you're already wearing, and it affects the way that it functions before your eyes based on what you're thinking about. Maybe in your hand you have a clicker too, right, or some sort of manual just in case it doesn't do what it needs to do. Maybe you need a mouse, so you have this in open air, and you can see it, but somehow it also connects with your brain activity through neuromodulation of some sort. So you were saying to yourself, okay, that sounds like an amazing industry. If that actually happens, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. We're talking about all sorts of, the way that Iron Man works. He can just think, and it goes through all the computer screens. It'll be mostly great for handicapped people. They can think, and it controls the legs or the wheels or this sort of thing of whatever devices. So there you go, young business founders. What devices could benefit from neuromodulation or this brain-computer connectivity that is being developed with or without you? So it's an opportunity to participate. There's a lot of other metatrends. And finally, there's going to be an increased focus on the environment. But if we're switching off of fossil fuel, I think the environmentalists have reason to celebrate for at least some years. So that is our Strategy Now section for today. We want to talk about some of the cutting-edge business models that have come out over the last 10 years, just in keeping with the theme of the rest of this episode. However, we could just go on about each one indefinitely. So I think what I'm going to do, there's 7 or 8 of them that I have identified here. Crowd economy, data economy, smartness economy, closed loop, decentralized, autonomous organizations, multiple world models, transformation economy. Let's take one of them at a time each week for the next 7 weeks, including this week. So let's start off with crowd economy in the first. It's the most common to understand. Most of the public is familiar with what crowd economy is at this point. And you would say Uber is the obvious poster child of a crowd economy type of application. Professional service providers use a platform to independently provide that service to individuals. So you don't think about who that taxi driver is when you call for a taxi. You just call for a taxi using the centralized application. And then somebody comes. You didn't pick who that somebody will be. They were queued up. They accepted it. And therefore, you have been put into contact with an independent taxi driving business owner, I guess, in a sense. And they are going to take you where you're going to go because all of that information comes to them from the platform. That is what crowd economy is. One of the biggest cliches in Silicon Valley is to call your business idea the Uber of this or the Uber of that. I suppose Airbnb is also the Airbnb of this or the Airbnb of that. But Uber, it's a great idea, and they're doing it with other things too. They're doing it with private planes now and this sort of thing. From what I understand, they've maybe not exactly the same as Uber works, but there's other business models that people are trying that kind of conform to crowd economy. I had a friend once. I was in the gym about 6 months ago, and I met a guy from Australia, and he said to me he was in Ukraine, here in Ukraine right now, and he was here because there's IT workers here who are helping him with a project. I said, okay, that's great. What's the type of project is it? He said, it's like a babysitting app. It's like the Uber of babysitting apps. Immediately, I thought to myself, wow, this must be $1 billion idea because Uber, of anything, says $1 billion. But then I thought about it for a second. I said, well, Uber of babysitters, is that something I would want to use? Would I want to use a babysitter app like Uber for my children? And this is when I sort of changed the subject because I realized that the answer was no. I'm not going to have somebody I don't know come and watch my children because an application told me to. That's an unacceptable risk. Somebody could sign up on the application, manipulate their feedback, especially on a new company, and before you know it, you have a convicted child molester in your house watching your kid. It's a huge risk, and this is just not how you select a babysitter. However, if the guy was painting a house, maybe it would work. Or if the guy was going to cut your grass, maybe it would work. The Uber for grass cutters. Now, that might be a good idea. There's 6 kids in your neighborhood who cuts grass, and all of them are on this application. Well, you can pick one of them easily. That's crowd economy. I guess, in a way, eBay could be considered a crowd economy. It's just for products as well. Amazon, increasingly so. When they first started off, they were just an online store. Well diversified inventory stream, but now they've become a crowd economy where people can go on and push their own products, and they have a user ID, and they can open their own little store on Amazon. And with eBay especially, probably in a sense, I would say the whole independent store feeling and idea is even more real with eBay. Okay, so we want to talk about the different aspects of crowd economy that you can take advantage of with your own business. The first one is crowd currencies. You're talking about your cryptocurrencies. I suppose you could even try to make your own. I think that takes a lot of technical know-how, but that's the real weakness of cryptocurrencies in the first place, is anybody can make one. Why would I use somebody else's when I can make my own? After a while, it becomes worthless because they haven't really figured out a real purpose for it yet. Peer-to-peer lending and commerce. I've thought about this a lot of times. If there could be a loan service where you could loan money to your friends and they could get the interest payments, and there was an intermediary agency that managed the transaction. There was one called Peer Loans or Peer Lend. I'm not sure if they continue to function as they once did, but that was a popular idea for a while. Equity-based crowdfunding, your Kickstarter campaign, that's a crowd business. That's a forum that a crowd uses to find you. Non-equity-based crowdfunding, I personally think equity-based crowdfunding is a lot better, but it comes with a lot of regulations. If you can say, I will give you the first product off the assembly line if you contribute to my crowdfunding, or I'll give you one of the first 100 or one of the first 1,000, that's attractive to some people, especially if it's a collectible type of item, or, people love to be first. They want to be the first ones with it. If you have a good idea, it could work through crowdfunding and through crowd economy. The sharing economy, co-creation, working together. I think even Google Documents could be considered part of crowd economy, couldn't it? Social business, the video game industry where you can play video games with your friends. That is a form of crowd economy too. Crowd tasks and creativity. You see 4 musicians in 4 windows playing together on YouTube over webcam or over web conference. And then it's broadcast over YouTube. There's crowd economy taking place all over the place there. And you can only assume that these sort of phenomena are going to grow into the future. The public is really hungry for new platforms that they can use to make their lives easier, to accomplish their dreams faster. Personally, I had an idea for a crowd economy one time, or a crowd economy business. And that was because, I'm a musician. I like to play guitar. I have always wanted to find musicians to play with, but I've always found it very difficult. Drummers are always in short supply. Every drummer I know is in 3 bands. And, bass players are not the most well-advertised type of musician either. It's always easy to find more guitar players, but to find the support or to find a good piano player to play with also, who also has time, who's also looking, it's very difficult. Up until now, we've had Craigslist, and you can post an advertisement and find people who are looking, but then you have to, there's so many question marks there. It's so uncurated of a method of finding just in this specific niche. Craigslist, it's not enough. And when I came to Ukraine, I asked a lot of people, how do I find musicians to play with? Is there a website? Is there a forum? No, we kind of use Facebook pages, and people just kind of find out who they find out about, and it's more person to person. And then in the United States, it's not so much different. There could be a forum where musicians sign up, they say what they play, and they, maybe there's some schedule. You can ask for time slots in people's schedule. You can post what dates you're available, or what your purpose is, or what you're trying to develop, or what type of group you're trying to join. And you can find each other based on the way you categorize yourself into the network. And this would allow you to find people to jam with. And I know it would be successful because I have wished for it a lot of times. I wish I could find a drummer right now. I don't know how to find one. Well, if there was a network that I could just go on and find all musicians who are available. Or let's assume that I want to do extreme sports. You could set up a social media just around finding people to do extreme sports with you. I want to go camping. I want to go skateboarding. I want to go bungee jumping. I want to go jump out of an airplane. Who's coming with me? That would be a popular, probably, social network if it was just about that niche. The temptation becomes, though, to make it bigger, to make it compete with Facebook. But it's not necessary to do that because Facebook already exists. But what Facebook doesn't do is activities management at all, or putting skilled people together in any sort of way. They want to get into dating because that's the most obvious direction to go with it, I suppose. They should have done it a long time ago. Let's look at a few others, see if there's anything else interesting here. Crowd intelligence, building ideas together, civic engagement, digitally collect platforms and activities to help inform, organize, and empower. It's happening a lot with coronavirus right now. I often wonder about the credentials or the actual understanding of the people claiming to inform, or the intentions of them informing. Why are they doing this? But for now we stay in our house because they tell us to. And next month we make new decisions, perhaps. So that is just a little bit on crowdfunding. It's a great way to get your idea off the ground. If you start off by saying, what sort of service do I wish to provide? And then from there, you look at your crowdfunding options. If you want, activities coordinator, people coordination, Crowd economy is a great way to get involved. So, good luck. Great. Now my favorite section. We are to the Profiles in Success section of our show, and this week we are focusing on Milton Friedman. He is a Nobel Prize winning economist. He's from the University of Chicago School of Economic Thinking. They consider themselves neoclassical, but what does that mean? Well, the classical model of economics is based on the idea of John Maynard Keynes, and that is pretty much throw money at problems until the problem goes away. And this has been considered the classical model of economics, at least up until the 60s. And then in the 60s, Chicago School of Economics started publishing papers that were very different. And Milton Friedman actually won the Nobel Prize in 1976 for his theories on monetary history and the complexities of stabilization policy and consumption analysis. And he's most well known for criticizing big government. He many of the most conservative economic policies that are circulating in American politics today come from his work. Mostly the fact that taxes are horrible for economies. You can't tax your way into prosperity. In fact, he was noted for saying that. You want to give people, and you can't control an economy into success. You have to understand that individual people know what to do for themselves better than you can ever know what to do for them. You have to let them choose. And the idea that you can centrally plan in a society is truly based on the premise that you look down on the people who you claim to be leading because you don't think that they can lead themselves. But the truth is that they can. And when you leave businesses alone, and when you leave individuals alone to make whatever decision is best for them, you're going to have a much more successful person, a much more efficient person. He called Keynesian theory naive, and he's really a champion of non-leftist, non-liberal political believers. So we're thinking of the Republicans in the United States, we're thinking of the Tories, and even more the Brexit Party in England. And he was well known for advising people like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. And the Estonian economic model, which at least up until recently has been very successful, was largely based on the works of Milton Friedman. It's one of the few economies of the world that can say that they've tried to follow his teachings precisely. And they've had a lot of economic success as a result. From what I understand, some of their political leanings have changed recently, especially because European Union has clawed back some of the autonomy that individual member states formerly enjoyed. But you can also see it in Chile. Chile was in terrible economic conditions, and now they're one of the most prosperous countries in South America. And Estonia, if they weren't part of European Union, would probably be much more successful if they followed the principles of Milton Friedman. But the most important principle I want to talk about today is based on the fact that I was reading an article that was talking about the ways that our mentality and our perceptions and our practices are going to change as a result of coronavirus. They talked about, drones being much more used. We talked last week about robotics, or a couple weeks ago about robotics being much more used in the future. And, there's other trends like solar energy is, in battery power, like we've talked about over and over again. Role of government, though. That's the big question, because in any time of a crisis, the government loves to take power. We need more power for the government to help us get through these times. Let's give our rights away to the government to protect us. We need someone to take care of our lives for us because they're so much more educated, or they're so much more noble, or they're so much more elite. So we should look to them to guide us, to make decisions for us, for our own benefit. Now, I'm somebody who's very skeptical of this, and Milton Friedman was too, and most, I think, libertarian-minded thinkers are skeptical of a government who claims to be able to do anything for you other than police and municipalities and military. So it really comes protecting me from people who want to hurt me. Other than that, leave me alone. But one big theme that has come up in American politics, especially in this election cycle, is this concept of universal basic income. The candidate Andrew Yang, who was, I guess you would call him an alumnus of Silicon Valley, so he made his fortune doing business in the United States, and he's really very much considered a Silicon Valley insider. He was almost like a Silicon Valley presidential candidate. But he caucused with the Democrats, and he had a lot of really unique ideas from any of the other candidates on the stage. One of them, most notably, his signature suggestion, I suppose you would say, is universal basic income. He wants to give $1,000 to every American every month. Aside from the fact that it would be massively expensive to do this, maybe it would cut down on our need for a social safety net. But I dare say that if we voted it in, the social safety net would also stay intact. You can only add to social programs. Politically, it's suicide to try to take some of them away or to repackage them into universal income instead of Social Security, or to repackage it into universal income instead of free health care, or to repackage it instead of any other socialist trope you might apply to it. But Milton Friedman had his thoughts on universal basic income, and he actually had a suggestion to apply it that was actually more consistent with conservative thinking. I think you should always be conservative, especially with economics, because there is no other system that works except for capitalism. They may say that, oh, we have alternatives. You choose capitalism, but we choose, communism. We choose socialism. What they're actually saying is, we wish it worked. We wish we could be communist, and we wish it worked. And we wish it so hard that we're just going to believe it anyways. But it doesn't work. It's not like communism is out there as an option. It just doesn't work. So it's not an option, actually. And universal basic income is truly a step in that direction. Milton Friedman had a suggestion about how to avoid some of the uglier aspects of providing benefits directly to citizens. He had a way to incorporate it into our current system, and what that is called is negative income tax. If you make a certain amount every year, you actually get some money back. If you make under $50,000 a year, maybe you start off getting a 10% negative income tax. If you make $40,000 a year, maybe you get a 20% negative income tax. If you make $30,000 a year, maybe you get a 30% negative income tax, which is just a little bit more than 20% of 40. So you can still make your $100 extra or still have your job. Maybe you'll get a little bit less negative income tax eventually, but it'll still be more profitable. It won't prevent you from going out and getting a job like the current welfare system. The current welfare system says if you get a job, then that gets deducted from the welfare you receive. Well, what if you take a job and then 2 months later you lose it, but then it takes 9 months to get back on welfare? You're going to be in a very difficult situation. So most people will just stay on welfare to prevent themselves from losing that lifeline. If you did it in the form of a negative income tax, it doesn't matter if they have a job or not. They just don't make enough, so you give them more. And it's very efficient because it's incorporated right into the tax system. So even though I am opposed to it on the level that it's like not the government's job to give you a paycheck, we are entering a stage in worldwide abundance where maybe it's possible to provide some very basic support for citizens if it's done in an efficient way. Well, the current welfare system bureaucracy, with all of its people involved and all of its arbitrary requirements and its inefficient work, non-work requirements, for instance, not to mention Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, HUD, food stamps, everything else that goes into taking care of poor people or old people who can't provide for their medical needs. Most of that, maybe not medical, but most of that could be solved by putting them according to their income on a negative income tax bracket. It's efficient. It's not my ideal. My ideal is figure it out for yourself. But practically, from the perspective of a politician, it's a way to take care of the people who wish to be cared for and do it in an efficient way so at least has a potential to work. And we would love to put bureaucrats out of business. And most of all, we just want to have a better world. And mostly the theory is that if we go around tinkering with society and economics enough, it's going to break down. Mutations don't improve things. And that's what I feel like most social programs are. So just something to think about. I highly encourage you to review the work of Milton Friedman. He will put you on a solid path and give you a solid perspective for looking at economics in the world that you probably won't find, at least in my experience, from anyone except maybe Thomas Sowell. Look into both of them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming to Business Love with Ryan. It's our 5th episode. I'm very proud of what we're doing, and I hope all of you will show our channel to your friends, and just thanks for coming.